The kidneys, which you do not take seriously, must have reached the point where you have consumed drinks. You must have never thought about it. The kidneys, which you could probably see with your own eyes, you would be afraid of how much burden you have put on the kidneys. Kidney failure is not related to age, but your habits damage the kidneys. Stop eating your evening fruit the way you've always eaten it, because for thousands of people over 60, that one habit is quietly pushing a failing kidney one step closer to dialysis. Nobody warns you about this. Not your pharmacist, not the produce guy at the grocery store, not even some well-meaning family member who keeps piling bananas onto your plate because potassium is healthy. I've spent years in nephrology wards watching patients arrive in the emergency room with kidney numbers that shouldn't be possible for someone who felt fine just weeks earlier, and almost every single time there was a warning sign their body gave them that they simply didn't know how to read. Here's a number that should stop you in your seat. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, more than 1 in 7 American adults, roughly 35 to 37 million people, are living with chronic kidney disease right now. And the part that keeps me up at night as a physician, as many as 9 out of 10 of them have no idea, 0 symptoms they'd recognize. Among adults 65 and older, that number climbs even higher, with over a third already affected. Every single day, 360 people in the United States alone begin dialysis for the first time. 360. Today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. This is not a rare disease that happens to someone else. This is happening in your neighborhood, possibly in your own body, right now, silently. So before we go any further, I want to ask you something, and I mean this. I read every single comment on these videos. So tell me 2 things down below. How old are you right now? And has a doctor ever mentioned your creatinine or your GFR number to you without really explaining what it meant? I ask because I want to know who's actually watching this, and because so many of you have told me in the past that nobody ever sat down and explained these numbers in plain English. That changes today. Now here's the tease, because I don't want you clicking away in the next 10 minutes without knowing this exists. Item number 2 on our countdown today involves a completely ordinary morning habit, something almost every one of you does before you've even had coffee, that nephrologists believe is silently raising kidney pressure in millions of older adults. It has nothing to do with diet. Stick around, because when we get there, I think you're going to feel a little bit betrayed by how simple it was and how long nobody told you. Let's build the foundation first, because you cannot protect an organ you don't understand. Your kidneys are 2 fist-sized organs sitting just below your rib cage, and think of them like the water treatment plant for an entire city, your body. Every 30 minutes, your kidneys filter your entire blood supply, pulling out waste, balancing your salts, controlling your blood pressure, and signaling your bone marrow to produce red blood cells through a hormone called erythropoietin. That last function is exactly why kidney failure and anemia travel together so often. When the filtration plant breaks down, the signal to make new red blood cells weakens, and patients become pale, breathless, and exhausted, even when their heart and lungs are perfectly healthy. Anemia in kidney disease isn't a separate problem. It's a direct consequence of the same failing system, and it's one of the clearest fingerprints that a kidney is struggling. Think about it this way. If the water treatment plant also happened to be the one facility responsible for radioing headquarters every time the city needed more delivery trucks, and that plant went quiet, headquarters would have no idea trucks were even needed. That's essentially what happens with erythropoietin. The kidney's radio signal to the bone marrow goes quiet, red blood cell production slows, and the resulting anemia leaves patients pale, short of breath climbing stairs they used to climb easily, and mentally foggy, often long before anyone thinks to check a simple blood count. Nephrologists describe kidney function in 5 stages, and understanding this scale is one of the most empowering things you can do for yourself. Stage 1 and 2 mean mild damage with function still largely preserved, often with 0 noticeable symptoms, which is exactly why routine blood work matters even when you feel perfectly well. Stage 3, where Margaret's story below begins, means function has dropped to somewhere between 30 and 59% of normal. And this is typically the stage where fatigue, mild swelling, and early anemia start to appear. Stage 4 means severe reduction, and stage 5 is what's commonly called kidney failure or end-stage renal disease. the point at which dialysis or transplant becomes necessary to sustain life. The entire goal of everything in this video is preventing the slide from stage 1 towards stage 4, because the earlier stages are frequently where lifestyle changes can genuinely halt or even partially reverse the trajectory, while later stages require much more intensive medical management. Kidney failure rarely happens because of one dramatic event. It happens because of years of quiet, repeated carelessness, the kind that feels harmless in the moment. Chronically high blood pressure that goes unmanaged scars the delicate filtering units called nephrons, the same way years of hard water damages plumbing. Uncontrolled blood sugar in diabetes literally sugarcoats the tiny blood vessels inside the kidney until they can no longer do their job. And diabetes and hypertension together are responsible for roughly 2 out of every 3 new cases of kidney failure in America. Chronic overuse of certain over-the-counter pain relievers, dehydration from simply not drinking enough water as thirst signals fade with age, and untreated urinary infections that quietly climb upward toward the kidneys all add their own damage year after year, until one day the numbers on a blood test reveal how much has already been lost. What does that damage feel like from the inside? This is where I want you to pay close attention, because kidney symptoms are notoriously easy to blame on just getting older. Persistent fatigue that doesn't improve with rest, swelling around the ankles, feet, or even the face in the morning, foamy or bubbly urine, a change in how often you urinate, especially more frequent trips at night, unexplained itching, a metallic taste in the mouth, nausea, muscle cramps, and that telltale pale, washed-out look on the skin that comes from anemia are the signals your kidneys send when they're overwhelmed. Any pain specifically felt in the flank, the area just below your ribs on either side of your spine, deserves urgent attention. And here is exactly what should be done about it. A basic metabolic panel checking your creatinine and calculating your estimated GFR, or glomerular filtration rate, which tells you what percentage of kidney function remains. A urine test checking for protein or albumin, since healthy kidneys don't leak protein. A complete blood count to check for the anemia we just discussed, and in many cases, an ultrasound of the kidneys to look for structural changes, blockages, or cysts. These are not expensive, exotic tests. They are commonly available, and if kidney pain or these symptoms are present, requesting them by name at your next appointment can shave months off a diagnosis that might otherwise be missed. Let me tell you about a patient I'll call Margaret, 72 years old, from a small town outside of Dayton, Ohio. Margaret came to see me because her ankles had been swelling for months, and she assumed it was simply old age catching up with her. She was tired constantly, but she'd stopped mentioning it to anyone because, in her words, everyone my age is tired. When we ran her labs, her GFR had dropped to 38% of normal function, and her hemoglobin, the protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen, was low enough to explain the exhaustion completely. Margaret had stage 3 chronic kidney disease and didn't know it. What changed her trajectory wasn't a miracle drug. It was catching it early enough to intervene with blood pressure control, dietary adjustment, and anemia management before permanent damage accumulated further. 18 months later, her kidney function has stabilized, her energy has returned, and she tells me she finally understands why doctors always ask about her ankles. Now let's get into exactly what protects the kidneys, ranked from good to absolutely essential, 5 down to 1. And because I know several of you are worried about existing kidney disease, I want to say clearly up front, if you already have diagnosed kidney disease, particularly in its later stages, some of what follows about potassium-rich fruit needs to be discussed with your nephrologist or renal dietitian first, because a damaged kidney sometimes cannot clear potassium efficiently, and what helps a healthy kidney can, in specific advanced cases, need to be limited. I will flag exactly where that applies as we go. Number 5, hydration timing, and specifically correcting your water intake rhythm rather than just drinking more water blindly. Here's what almost nobody explains about aging and hydration. After roughly age 70, your sense of thirst becomes measurably less reliable, sometimes described in geriatric research as a blunted thirst response, meaning your brain simply stops nagging you to drink water the way it did at 40, even though your kidneys need that fluid just as much, if not more, to flush waste efficiently. Think of your kidneys like a delivery truck that needs enough gasoline, meaning water, to make its rounds through your bloodstream. Without adequate fuel, the truck still tries to make deliveries, but it moves sluggishly. Waste builds up along the route, and over years that sluggish system contributes to concentrated urine, kidney stones, and accelerated decline in filtration capacity. The fix is not chugging enormous amounts of water at once, which can actually stress the kidneys and dilute your sodium levels dangerously. Instead, spread 6 to 8 cups across the day in smaller amounts, front-loading more in the morning and early afternoon, and tapering off 3 hours before bed so you're not up all night. And pair this habit with a pinch of watching your urine color, aiming for pale straw rather than dark yellow. The synergy tip here is pairing consistent hydration with a modest increase in fiber, because adequate water helps fiber do its job of regulating blood sugar and cholesterol, both of which indirectly protect kidney blood vessels. There's also a second layer to hydration timing that most people never hear about. Caffeine and alcohol both act as mild diuretics, meaning they push extra fluid out through the kidneys. And after roughly age 65, the kidney's ability to quickly recalibrate and hold on to needed fluid afterward becomes measurably slower, which is part of why many older adults feel disproportionately fatigued or lightheaded after their usual afternoon coffee or evening glass of wine compared to years earlier. This doesn't mean eliminating either one, but simply following each caffeinated or alcoholic drink with an equivalent glass of water keeps the delivery truck running smoothly instead of forcing it to make an emergency, under-fueled trip. Coming up at number 4, we move from water to something in your kitchen that most people over 60 are either eating far too much of or not nearly enough of. And the science behind why is honestly stunning. Number 4, potassium-rich produce used correctly. Bananas, oranges, potatoes with the skin on, spinach, and avocados are frequently praised for heart health, and the research genuinely supports that praise. Potassium helps counterbalance sodium's effect on blood pressure, and blood pressure control is arguably the single most protective thing you can do for your kidneys, since hypertension and diabetes together account for the large majority of kidney failure cases in this country, according to CDC surveillance data. For someone with healthy or only mildly reduced kidney function, incorporating potassium-rich produce several times a week supports healthier blood pressure and reduces the long-term strain on kidney blood vessels. However, and this is the flag I promised, once kidney function drops into the more advanced stages, roughly stage 4 or 5, or once someone is on dialysis, the kidneys often lose the ability to clear excess potassium, and dangerously high potassium levels can affect the heart's rhythm. This is precisely why any fruit recommendation for kidney patients must be individualized by a nephrologist or renal dietitian. And it's why I never want a general video like this one to substitute for your own blood work. For most people simply trying to prevent kidney disease in the first place, though, the synergy tip is pairing potassium-rich foods with reduced processed sodium intake, because the ratio between the two matters more than either number alone. And swapping a salty processed snack for a baked sweet potato in the same sitting essentially doubles the blood pressure benefit. This is a good moment to pause because I don't want you to lose this list. If this information is new to you, or if it's confirming something you suspected about your own health, hit that subscribe button and tap like right now. Because next week, I'm walking through the exact foods that quietly spike blood pressure without tasting salty at all, and you don't want to miss it. It also genuinely helps this channel reach more people your age who are searching for real answers instead of vague wellness advice. All right, back to the countdown. We're moving into the territory now where the science gets more specific and where aging bodies behave very differently than younger ones. Number 3, managing anabolic resistance and muscle-related waste through smarter protein timing. Here's a concept most people have never heard of, but that directly affects kidney health. Anabolic resistance, which is the well-documented tendency for muscle tissue in older adults to respond less efficiently to the protein you eat, requiring more targeted intake to maintain the same muscle mass that came easily at 40. Research on aging and sarcopenia, the medical term for age-related muscle loss, shows that after age 75, the body can lose a significant portion, in some studies estimated near 30%, of its efficiency in converting dietary protein into maintained muscle. Why does this matter for kidneys specifically? Muscle breakdown and rebuilding produces creatinine, a waste product that healthy kidneys clear easily. But a kidney already under strain has a harder time keeping up with fluctuating creatinine loads, especially when protein is consumed in one enormous meal rather than spread throughout the day. The practical fix is distributing moderate protein, lean poultry, fish, eggs, legumes, across 3 or 4 smaller servings daily rather than one large dinner, which supports muscle maintenance without asking the kidneys to process a sudden spike all at once. For someone with diagnosed kidney disease, total protein amount should absolutely be guided by a renal dietitian, since too much protein over time can accelerate kidney strain in already damaged kidneys, which is the opposite problem from muscle loss and requires its own careful balance. The synergy tip is pairing protein intake with light resistance movement, even simple chair exercises or short walks after meals, because muscle activity improves how efficiently the body uses that protein, reducing leftover nitrogen waste the kidneys would otherwise have to filter. There's a reason this matters so much specifically for seniors. Sarcopenia doesn't just affect strength and balance, it directly changes how your blood work should be interpreted. Because a person who has lost significant muscle mass will often show a creatinine level that looks deceptively normal on paper, even while true kidney filtration has already declined substantially, simply because there's less muscle generating creatinine in the first place. This is one of the most under-discussed blind spots in senior kidney care, and it's exactly why your doctor calculating your estimated GFR, rather than looking at creatinine alone, matters so much once you're past 70. Now, remember that tease from the beginning of this video? Here it is. Number 2, nighttime and morning blood pressure surges, specifically what's known in cardiovascular and renal research as the morning surge or nocturnal non-dipping pattern. In a healthy person, blood pressure naturally dips 10 to 20% overnight while sleeping, giving blood vessels, including the delicate vessels inside your kidneys, a period of relative rest. But researchers studying aging populations have found that a substantial number of older adults, particularly those with any degree of existing kidney impairment or diabetes, fail to experience this dip, a pattern doctors call non-dipping, and instead show blood pressure that stays elevated through the night or spikes sharply within the first hour of waking. That sustained overnight pressure, occurring silently while you sleep, delivers continuous mechanical stress to kidney blood vessels for years without a single symptom you'd notice, making it one of the most under-recognized contributors to kidney decline in people over 60. This is the completely ordinary habit I mentioned. It's not something you eat or drink. It's simply how your blood pressure behaves while you sleep, and the moment you wake, something almost nobody checks because standard doctor visits only capture blood pressure once, during the daytime, sitting calmly in an office chair. The practical fix is requesting what's called ambulatory or home blood pressure monitoring, where you check your pressure first thing upon waking, before coffee, before standing up and moving around, for several consecutive days, and bringing those numbers to your physician. If a morning surge or non-dipping pattern is identified, timing certain blood pressure medications to be taken in the evening rather than the morning, under your doctor's guidance, has been shown in research to better protect overnight kidney blood flow than morning-only dosing. The synergy tip is pairing this monitoring habit with a calm, consistent bedtime routine, since poor sleep quality itself independently worsens nighttime blood pressure control, creating a cycle that compounds kidney stress. I promised you'd feel a little betrayed that nobody explained this sooner, and I mean that sincerely. This single overlooked pattern may be doing more silent damage in this room right now than anything on your dinner plate. And that brings us to number 1, the single most powerful, most underappreciated factor in protecting aging kidneys: inflammation control through mitochondrial support, and specifically through targeted, evening-appropriate fruit choices that most people are either eating at the wrong time or skipping entirely. Here's the science behind why this matters so specifically for older bodies. Mitochondria are the tiny energy-producing structures inside every cell, often called the cell's power plants. And as we age, mitochondrial efficiency declines, producing more oxidative stress, a kind of cellular rust that accumulates faster than younger bodies can clear it. Kidney cells are especially mitochondria dense because filtering blood around the clock is enormously energy-intensive work, which means kidney tissue is disproportionately vulnerable to this age-related oxidative decline compared to many other organs. Chronic low-grade inflammation, sometimes referred to in research circles as inflammaging, accelerates this cellular rust and has been linked in kidney research to faster progression from healthy function toward chronic kidney disease. This is precisely where the right evening fruit choice becomes so powerful, because certain fruits are unusually dense in polyphenols and antioxidants that specifically counter this overnight oxidative and inflammatory burden while you sleep, which is exactly when your body does the majority of its cellular repair work. A short note on preparation, because how you eat these fruits matters almost as much as which ones you choose. Fresh or frozen is always preferable to canned, since canned fruit is frequently packed in syrup that adds an unnecessary sugar load right before bed. And washing fresh produce thoroughly reduces exposure to surface residues that add an extra unnecessary burden for the kidneys to filter out. Cutting fruit into smaller pieces rather than eating it whole and rushed also tends to slow the pace of eating, which gives your digestive system, and by extension your blood sugar response, a gentler curve to work with overnight, rather than a sudden spike. Blueberries stand out consistently in nutritional research for their anthocyanin content, a class of antioxidant compound linked to reduced inflammatory markers, and a modest evening portion, roughly 3/4 of a cup, provides meaningful antioxidant support without an excessive sugar or potassium load for most people with healthy kidney function. Apples, eaten with the skin on, contain quercetin, another polyphenol studied for its anti-inflammatory properties, and their fiber content helps moderate the blood sugar response overnight, which matters because unstable overnight blood sugar independently stresses kidney blood vessels in exactly the way we discussed with the morning surge. For those specifically managing existing kidney disease, lower potassium options like berries in modest portions are generally considered friendlier choices than high potassium fruits such as bananas, oranges, melons, or dried fruit. But again, and I cannot stress this enough for anyone with a kidney diagnosis, this is a conversation to have directly with your nephrologist or renal dietitian, because individual potassium tolerance varies enormously depending on your specific stage of kidney function and any medications you're taking. For someone without diagnosed kidney disease, simply trying to protect their kidneys proactively, a small evening portion of berries or apple, eaten roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours before bed, allows digestion to settle before lying down, while still delivering those antioxidant compounds during the window when your body's repair processes are most active overnight. The synergy tip that most people never hear. Pairing that evening fruit with a small handful of walnuts or a few almonds, because the modest fat content slows sugar absorption from the fruit even further and provides additional anti-inflammatory omega-3 compounds that appear to work synergistically with the fruit's polyphenols, essentially amplifying the overnight cellular repair benefit, rather than simply adding two separate good habits side by side. Let me tell you about one more patient before we close, because I think his story captures exactly why this list matters. Robert, 68 years old, a retired mechanic from outside Tulsa, Oklahoma, came to me 2 years ago after a routine physical flagged a slightly reduced GFR and mild anemia. Robert was the kind of patient who assumed kidney problems only happened to people who did something wrong, and he was frustrated and a little frightened. We worked through exactly the kind of plan we've discussed today. Home blood pressure monitoring that revealed a clear morning surge, an adjustment in when he took his blood pressure medication, spreading his protein intake across the day instead of one enormous dinner, and yes, swapping his late-night salty snacking habit for a small bowl of blueberries with a few walnuts. 14 months later, Robert's kidney function had not just stabilized, it had modestly improved. His hemoglobin normalized without needing additional medication, and he told me during his last visit that he finally felt like he had some control over something that once felt completely outside his hands. What struck me most about Robert's case wasn't any single change he made. It was how small each individual adjustment felt in the moment, and how much they added up to over a year of consistent practice. None of what we did required expensive supplements, exotic superfoods, or dramatic lifestyle overhauls. It required understanding, a little bit of planning, and the willingness to treat his kidneys as something worth paying attention to before a crisis forced the issue. I want to add one more piece here that ties everything together, because so many of you watching are caring not just for yourselves, but for a spouse, a parent, or an older neighbor. And you're wondering how to bring any of this up without sounding alarming. The gentlest way I've found is simply asking to see the actual lab results together after any routine physical. Specifically asking the doctor to point out the creatinine number, the estimated GFR, and the hemoglobin level, and asking what each one means in plain language, exactly the way we've done today. Most physicians are genuinely glad when a patient or their family member asks this, because it opens the door to catching problems in stage 1 or 2 rather than stage 4, when far fewer options remain on the table. That's really what this entire conversation comes down to. Kidney health isn't about chasing perfection or living in fear of every meal. It's about protecting your independence, the ability to travel to see your grandchildren without planning your day around a dialysis schedule, the energy to garden or golf, or simply walk through your own neighborhood without needing to stop and catch your breath, and the quiet confidence of knowing your numbers and understanding what they mean instead of dreading your next blood test. It is never too late to start protecting these two remarkable organs, whether you're 62 and prevention-focused or 78 and managing an existing diagnosis, because kidney tissue that hasn't been permanently scarred can often stabilize, and even damaged kidneys respond meaningfully to the right combination of hydration, blood pressure timing, protein pacing, and the right evening fruit choices we've walked through today. Full references for every study and statistic mentioned in this video, including the CDC and National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases data we discussed at the start, are linked in the description below, so you can bring them directly to your own doctor and have an informed conversation rather than simply taking my word for it. I built this video specifically so you'd walk away with real numbers to ask about, real tests to request by name, and real, practical changes you can make starting tonight, not vague reassurance that everything will be fine on its own. If this video gave you something you didn't know walking in, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss next week's deep dive on the exact foods that silently spike blood pressure, and hit that like button so more people your age can find this information too. And before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. Which of these 5 habits are you already doing without realizing it, and which one are you going to start tonight? Tell me your age again if you haven't already, and tell me honestly which number on this list surprised you the most, because that tells me exactly what to cover in more depth next time. I read every single comment, so don't be shy, write as much as you want, and I promise I will see it. Take care of these two remarkable organs of yours, be a little kinder to them starting tonight, and I'll see you in the next one.